Most of the black heroes around the world, the Caribbean, Guyana. And if you know all these names, just sing. Emancipation Day is a day we must celebrate. Our heroes who fought for us are really great. When I sit back and reminisce on the contribution, fighting oppression and struggle for liberation, we must recognize they shout their voices for the rights of Africans, lost their lives and position fighting for the freedom. So I won't hesitate to call the names of black people that made us proud. When I start to call, if you know these names, just sing it aloud. Guyana 1763 slave rebellion was laid by hero for Damon and Akara. Lost their lives fighting just for we. Martin Luther King was a black civil rights leader. Malcolm X, Jesse Jackson, Rosa Parks fight the system in America. The great Nelson Mandela fought apartheid in South Africa. The first black American president was Barack Obama. So these distinguished black men and women, to the occasion all of them rose. So you and I must come together and salute our heroes. They are writers, lawyers, doctors, politicians. They work very hard and mold the Caribbean. Sir Derek Walcott, a laureate writer, icon here in St. Lucia. In Trinidad, they have trade unionists, Uriah Butler. There's Ree Bernardes, the first black woman on a post in the CCJ. Brantley Adams, a Bajan hero, who lead the way. Colonialism to independence, that will go down in history. Yes, they made a great contribution to their respective territory. Lyndon Pop Sampson Barnum, a great visionary politician. Dr. Eric William, Trinidad, great father of the nation. Prime Minister Sarah Barrow and Michael Manley, former part of the Big Four for Caribbean unity. Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow formed the first trade union. Weber, he's a great man, and Marcus the Jamaican. So these distinguished black men and women, to the occasion all of them rose. So you and I must come together and salute our heroes. Hey, oh Lord, there's plenty to name, too numerous to mention. Aye. Performing as black people, exceptional. In music and theater, we recognize international. We excel now in everything that we do. Look at the sufferings we poor parents went through. We must recognize our heroes in and out of the Caribbean. They made a great contribution and laid the foundation. So let's dance to the music, be educated, lift our heads up high. These people fight, and many black people die. The great brother Brother Bob Marley was Jamaica greatest superstar. Sparrow and Kitchener revolutionized Calypso so far. With the Houston and Michael Jackson, greatest stars in America. Sidney Poitier, he lead the way as a black actor. First Guyanese international artist, Bill Rogers, but we are the top. Eddie Grant, a great superstar, always at the top. So these distinguished black men and women, to the occasion all of them rose. So you and I must come together and salute our heroes. Oh yes, I want to pay some tribute to the sports people now. And the names are calling, you can't beat them, because they are the top. Hey. Sweet Taiso. Last but not least, I bound to mention our greatest sportsmen and women. There are so many to mention that I cannot remember all. But permit me to name some stalwarts that I can recall. The black man is fruitful, courageous, yes, and very strong. The African race is a great race that we belong. The struggle was hard, painful, yes, and dangerous. But we struggle and fight and won the battle, and freedom was given to us. The greatest heavyweight boxer was Muhammad Ali. Usain Bolt, the greatest spring champion this world has ever seen. Williams sisters dominate tennis. Simona Biles in long tennis. Brian Lara and Gary Sobers records there in cricket. Tiger Woods in golf and King Pele made football history. Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, basketball supremacy. So these distinguished black men and women, to the occasion all of them rose. So you and I must come together and salute our heroes. Hey. Yeah. And these were the heroes.
Well, they drop a hydrogen bomb in PG. Lord of mercy, they drop a hydrogen bomb in PG. Lord of mercy, riot in tongue, mama. I hear the whole place on fire, from Kitty to the waterfront, all that burn down flat, flat, flat. I ain't care if all a BG burn down. I ain't care if the whole of Booker's burn down. But they'll be putting me out my way if they tackle Tiger Bay and burn down my hotel where all them robbing to stay. They lock up over 1,000 people. Well, that was trouble. They sent for policemen in the country to bring unity, but police are all afraid. Stand up on the watering stores, get raid. Walk in the store, take everything, and when you set fire to the building. But I ain't care if the whole of PG bun down. I ain't care if all the bookers bun down, but they'll be putting me out me way if they tackle Tiger Bay and bun down me hotel way all me wab in the stay. A woman walking a store on Main Street, slippers on she feet, dirty petticoat, long time straw hat, and she smelling worse than that, but she walk out like a lady. High heels, glasses, jewelry, the straw hat she had on wearing before, she take match and she bun it inside the store. I don't care if the whole of BG bun down. I ain't care if all the bookers bun down, but they'll be putting me out me way if they tackle Tiger Bay and bun down me hotel way all me wab in the stay. Sweet steps, Basso. Let's go, Daddy. Ayeha. Oh. They send for soldiers quite up in England. With big confusion, they bring down warships with cannon like peas to shoot Guyanese, but Burnham say, all right now, I'm the only man to stop this row. He give me the signal and that's the case. Now we have peace and quiet in the place, but I ain't care if the whole of Bridget burned down. I didn't care if all the bookers burned down. They'll be putting me out me way only if they tackle Tiger Bay and burn down me hotel with all me wab in the stay. One more time, let's go, Daddy. Swing it out, boys. Well, they drop a hydrogen bomb in PG. Lord of mercy, they drop a hydrogen bomb in PG. Lord of mercy, riot in tongue, mama. I hear the whole place on fire, from Kitty to the waterfront, all that, burn down flat. I ain't care if all the beachy burn down. I ain't care if the whole of bookers burn down. But they'll be putting me out me way if they tackle Tiger Bay and burn down me hotel where all them wab in the stay. They lock up over 1,000 people. Well, that was trouble. They sent for policemen in the country to bring unity, but police are all afraid. Stand up on the watching stores, get rid. Walk in the store, take everything, and when you're done, set fire to the building. But I ain't care if the whole of BG burn down. I ain't care if all the bookers burn down. But they'll be putting me out me way if they tackle Tiger Bay and burn down me hotel where all me wab in the stay. A woman walking a store on Main Street, slippers on she feet, dirty petticoat, long time straw hat, and she smelling worse than that, but she walk out like a lady. High heels, glasses, jewelry, the straw hat she had on wearing before. She take much and she bun it inside the store. I don't care if the whole of BG bun down. I don't care if all the bookers bun down. But they'll be putting me out my way if they tackle Tiger Bay and bun down me hotel where all me want in the stay. Sweet sax, Basso. Let's go, Daddy. Ayeha! Oh, 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 oh. They send for soldiers quite up in England. With big confusion, they bring down warships with cannon like peas to shoot Guyanese. But Burnham say, all right now, I'm the only man to stop this row. He give me the signal and that's the case. Now we have peace and quiet in the place. But I ain't care if the whole of Bridget burned down. I didn't care if all the bookers burned down. They'll be putting me out me way only if they tackle Tiger Bay and burn down me hotel with all me what in the stay.
Flinger Francisco, the greatest of them all, the mighty sparrow, exponent of what I am claiming is the greatest musical genre that the world has seen. B.G. War, chronicling an important part of Guyanese and Caribbean history, 1961 to 1964. Ethnic violence in Guyana, and the Calypsonian captures it. The Calypsonian makes the point that they got certain people NK, whether you get riot or you get ethnic violence. Today we call them the scrapeheads and things. He said people are having fun in Tiger Bay. And the poverty in Tiger Bay means that people from Tiger Bay and worrying about the ethnic violence. And he's making the point there that poverty sometimes blind people to certain realities around a very profound point. I don't care if they're Bandung Bukors. Bukors is not Guyanese, is not West Indian. Bukors is colonial. I don't care if they're born them down. Once they don't burn down the local business, profound point the Calypsonian is making. And he talks about looting. But the creativity, the lady going with her strat, she burned the strat in the store. And she come out with a heel shoe, walking like a lady. And then finally in the last stanza, he talks about the colonials sending in troops to shoot down Guyanese. But Burnham said, stop the violence, and the violence was stopped. And that is why Calypso is the greatest music in the world. Takes a political incident and gives you the different dimensions, the international dimension, the colonialism, the class, the race. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We're going to roll. We expect, I know Dr. Vincent Adams is here. I'm seeing the Honorable Sharma Solomon. I don't see Apostle London here yet. These busy people sometimes. We are going to be talking about. I don't see Pastor London yet. We're waiting on him. We're waiting on Apostle London to come in so that we can start our discussion. So many of you are here early tonight, because of this important discussion. Betaram Ramarak has written a book called The Wisma Massacre. And the publishing of that book has ignited a discussion of the wider ethnic conflict that happened in our country from 1961 to 1964. I have had the privilege, the opportunity to study ethnicity and politics. My dissertation was titled Ethnicity, Authoritarianism and Resistance, A Political History of Guyana, 1953 to 1992. I subsequently taught for over 20 years a course that I designed, and like I said, I taught, called Race, Ethnicity, and Politics in Africa and the African Diaspora. I want to lay down those credentials to say that this issue is one that that I have studied and taught. And I can tell you, right now in the world, there are over 200 ethnic conflicts, believe it or not. Ethnicity and race are factors that drive human beings in certain directions. We know about what's happening right now in the Middle East, the wars in the Middle East. We know about the war in Russia and Ukraine. They are ethnic wars. I'll tell you all kind of story. But at the bottom of it, it's ethnicity. There are over 200 ethnic conflicts in the world as we speak. And we start off by believing that human beings are rational. And if human beings are rational, why they engage in ethnic conflict? That is the question. That is the question. All the studies have shown that ethnic conflicts are driven by certain factors. One, the threat of dispossession, usually of land. Second, the threat of disenfranchisement, that your vote doesn't count or you are denied the right to vote. Third factor is the threat to the collective dignity of people. And finally, the opportunity to settle historical scores. There are other factors, but those are the four main factors that have driven ethnic conflicts around the world. Some conflicts are non-violent, because like I said, there are over 200 conflicts. Some conflicts are non-violent, conflicts nevertheless. Some of them are violent. In our case in Guyana, our conflict got violence. And we became independent 2 years after the end of the ethnic conflict. 2 years after slaughtering each other on the issue of who governs. Independence is coming, and the two ethnic groups are fighting over the question, who governs? And 2 years later, we become independent. And we set our aspiration of one people, one nation, one destiny. What it means is that we are forcing, the state is imposing a unity. No time for Africans and Indians to sit down and to work through the trauma of 61 to 64. We move out of that conflict into nation building. The farthest we came, it was when Ascre and IPRA in the 1970s set up something called the Race Commission. And they went Indian communities and African communities and got them to talk separately and together about what happened, about the racial problem. Closest we came. Other than that, in a sense, in the quest for nation building, we silence what happened in the 1960s. I remember as a young man in my own village, when we argued to villagers as young WPA activists, why Africans and Indians must unite. And I remember old people calling me in and saying, we with you all. But the atrocities that happened in the 60s, and they tell you about what they suffered. Yes, in our quest for nation building, we silenced what really happened in the 1960s. And so therefore, 60 years after independence, in a sense, we've come face to face with the issue. Why? Because we have now a fundamental question that is being asked. Who controls 30 billion barrels of oil? Controls it. We know the international people gone with 3/4 of it, but who controls the rest that is coming together? That is the fundamental question. And the who is not just simply which class, it's which race. And so therefore, the issue of race and racial violence has followed us. Sharma Solomon, one of our guests tonight, somebody sent his letter. Sometimes they don't send a letter to me, but somebody sent it to me. And I published it on my page. And before I came on here, 105,000 people had read Sharma Solomon's letter on Son Chapman. 105, just on my page. What that says is that there is a public interest in this subject, but other things get in the way, so we have never really discussed the subject. And what Betoram did is open up the opportunity for a discussion. So, Wisma, Mackenzie, Linden, one of the several theaters, there are two aspects of the conflict there. The expulsion of East Indians from Wisma. 2 people died, several incidents of rape and pillage. And Son Chapman, 32 people died. 2 Indians died in the conflict there, the expulsion of Indians, and the killing of 32 Africans. To get an understanding of what went on and to get an honest discussion, you cannot, well, you can, if you discuss the two incidents separately, you're running the risk of exacerbating the problem. 4 years of ethnic conflict, and people have a right to isolate. Betoram is part of a group of Indian rights activists, and clearly he's concerned about Indian victimhood. And so his work is about highlighting Indian victimhood that has been silenced. And with him. So it is up to Africans to highlight African victimhood. And then the Africans and Indian activists sit down and talk about our collective victimhood. EUC Guyana gave us a framework. He says no race was guilty during the disturbance. No guilty race. Both races had been aggressive to each other. Both races have been violent to each other. And so no race is guilty. Indian activists have described the expulsion of Indians from Wisma as a massacre. Some have called it genocide. Some have called it ethnic cleansing. I think Betoram says he prefers ethnic cleansing. But there is no such description to the 30-odd black people who died. Was that genocide? Was that a massacre? When Betoram was asked about it on Freddie Kissoon's program, he said, well, the story that he heard is that the black people killed themselves. That PNC activists were transporting explosives to Linden, ostensibly to use against Indian people. And they put it in the engine room, and the thing exploded and killed 30-something black people. So here is an Indian rights activist saying that black people massacred Indians. But when it comes to discussing black people, he said, well, the black people killed themselves. As I said, I've studied ethnicity, and that is not strange. Ethnic narratives are a fact of life. Are a fact of life. I grew up in an African village, and I've heard narratives. I've had the opportunity to visit Indian villages, and I've heard counter narratives about what happened. That's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about that tonight. And I have 3 Lindeners here. One of them is unique, Dr. Vincent Adams. His mother was East Indian. So he mixed. He's what we call Douglas. And we learned here last week or the week before that the term Douglas comes from Hindu Sanskrit. The term Douglas, the word Douglas mean in the Hindu Sanskrit, the child of a prostitute. I always thought, as like so many of us, that Douglas was a Creole term. It's a Hindu term. Mean the son of a prostitute. Over the time we have used Douglas in a positive sense to say Douglas can mean the unity, but that was not the original meaning of the term. We have changed the meaning over time. to say a Dougla mean unity. The mighty Dougla in Trinidad in his Calypso 1961, he ran the crown, he said, well, split me in two. Right? You know, these are issues that I want us to begin to talk about tonight. I am conscious that this is going to be the other narrative. Well, I'm not too sure because we may have to split Vincent in two, right? And he may give both narratives, right? But this is a serious issue. As I said, because of nation building, we kind of silence the thing. You see how Sparrow in this Calypso? Burnham said stop, and it stopped. What he means there is that the politician said, all right, enough. And enough was enough, and we moved on. But ethnicity never goes away. It never goes away. So here we are, sisters and brothers. We're going to talk about Wisma, because Wisma is a microcosm of the larger conflict that engulfed our country for 4 long years. 4 long years. And you don't beat up and kill up each other for 4 years and dismiss it in a year or two. That's no way. So I know you all come out, oh gosh, you all in big numbers tonight. Your ratings tonight. Beating Shara tonight. All right, let me bring in our guest, Dr. Vincent Adams. No, this is Sharma Solomon. This is Pastor London, and this is Sharma Solomon. Gentlemen, good evening, and welcome to Politics 101.
Hey, good evening, all. Good evening, Doc. Hope everybody can hear me. How are y'all doing?
Good evening, Doc, and Nigel and Sharma and your good listeners. Glad to be back, Dr. Hines. I know it's not our regular Friday gig, but Thursday is just as good enough.
It's good enough. We get in there. We get into Friday.
Greetings to all.
Yes, Pastor London. I noticed you haven't been on in about 3-4 months too. But here we are. Now let me start with this question. You're all Lindeners, and you may not have read Betaram's book. I intend to invite Betaram to this program separately, and if he agrees to come separately and then later to be part of a panel with either all of you or some of you, because I think we have to have separate discussions and then discussions together on this issue. But Betaram uses the word massacre. That's not an easy word, as we were saying. It's not an easy word. When you talk about massacre, you're talking about serious violence. It's not just a disturbance. Disturbance is a term that I grew up and hear that the disturbance of the 1960s. Betaram and other Indian rights activists are saying, what happened to Indians in Wisma? When past disturbance, it was massacre. Let me be frank and ask each of you, do you share that view? And I'll start with seniority. Dr. Adams.
Is it seniority by age or because you've got some honorable men?
Seniority by age and honorableness.
Yeah, Dr. Hines, you've made some excellent points here, and I think the most important thing that you said to me is that, of course, I think most of us, especially come from Linden, would take offense to what Betaram had written. And by the way, he was kind enough to call me and even send me a copy of his book. I started reading it, and he even quoted me on page 200. But I don't think he quoted everything, but he quoted me, which is okay. But I think the most important thing you said there was that I think this here, it provides an opportunity. I don't want to say it's a backlash but it provides an opportunity for folks to get another version of the story. I don't know what was the intention of Beta Ram, but if that book was just allowed to go out there, that would have been the narrative that people would have believed. So I think this here presents an opportunity, programs such as yours, to let people understand that that was only one version, which is a misrepresentation of what the people of Linden are and what we've been and what we will continue to be. It's a misrepresentation, obviously, and I think that is going to come out very clear tonight, because Linden has never been a community where race has ever been endorsed or practiced, and we can I'm sure the rest of the night we're going to go through this. But the other thing that I need to remind you of, Dr. Hinds, I'm going to get on your case. This is not Wisman Mackenzie.
Christianborg.
And by the way, Christianborg is the first community of the three that was established. But everybody, and not that I want to take credit for what happened in the violence, but I think everybody seems to be forgetting the whole thing about Christianborg and is part of this community, and obviously that's where I came from. But like I said, and what I hope is going, well, I know it's going to come out here tonight, is that we're going to show that Linden has never been a racist community. And I know that you would appreciate the one piece of evidence that you will appreciate it, Dr. Knight, as one of the most ardent cricket fans there is. We actually had a cricket team in Linden in our local competition. What was the name of that cricket team, Dr. Hines? All Indian.
Wow.
All Indian cricket team. And it was a normal thing. Nobody ever paid, it wasn't a big deal. And it was obviously just all Indians, but we played together and it was accepted. But that was part of the culture that was accepted. So when you hear, well, we were racist, how could you be racist and have an all Indian team that everybody accept? And what was interesting too, that we had, like even in the alley where I lived, we had like four Indians. And who was one of the main Indian person, if you will, lived three or four houses from where I lived in my alley. And that was Christina Ramjatan, the PPP MP.
Yes.
And when, I remember when the Indians, we used to be so close that even when you have, when you have these Indian weddings, there's food too much. And we used to have more black people at those weddings, more than the Indian people. You didn't have to get invited, but you were welcomed. And but it was a welcoming community to both races. So I want to I think we need to just get rid of this whole narrative that somehow the Linden folks were racist. We never were, and we never will be.
And thank you very much, Vincent, for that introduction. I think it's apt, and I have to apologize to my MP, and my other representative. During the Linden Tongue Week, a friend of mine who is part Linden and part Buxton, he wanted to go to Christianborg to meet some of his school friends. He hadn't been back there in a couple of decades. And I took the ride because I wanted to go to the Wisma night, because it was a day of the Wisma night and thing. We went in there and we went down at the burying ground till at the back, because there's from a friend down at the there and
Christianborg.
Christianborg. And that street there, they call it, I think they said they call it the Harry Street. Well, the Harrys were from Buxton, right? So I get to meet some of my Buxtonians there. But, of course, they recognize me a little by. So, there's not a man to step on TV. And the people say, yeah. And they carry me to a birthday party. And the birthday party, became a community meeting. I now confess it to me, MP, that I went into this district and held a meeting without informing him.
Once a punch is felt is all good, Doc. A punch is a punch. We welcome the fight. Any punch is welcome.
But what was interesting, they show me when Norton Barn and Grow, Adams Barn and Grow, where the Carbons the Barn and Grow. And they also showed me houses where Indians who during the story were protected and hidden by black, and they're showing me these houses and in Christiansburg. And it was quite a thing. We stayed there. We never get to go to the Wisma, the Wisma tongue night, because when we were done there, it was in the dead of night. You couldn't get in to the middle of the story, and we had to leave and come back to Boston. I didn't know then that I would be doing this program tonight. I didn't ask them about the massacre, but they felt that they needed to tell me. Most of them were women, but there were some men there who, in a sense, gave me a political tour of Christiansburg. And so, again, I apologize to my MP for coming into the district. I apologize.
Job well done, Doc.
Apostle.
Job well done.
District and did the thing.
Hey, Doc,
yes.
not to be biased, to be all inclusive as we are.
I apologize to you.
Mark Phillips is also from Christian, but not from Mark.
Yes.
Grew up in the same alley with me. So just to be inclusive, Mark Phillips also is from
yes. Sharma, let me come to you. You and Pastor, Apostle, you all are the youth in this company. And it's your perspective then becomes important. Because you're coming at it not from memory as in the case of
Doc.
You know, you are coming at it from your perspective as activists who care very deeply about the community. Is the description, and this is for both of you, is the description massacre an apt description of what took place, what you have heard from elders, what you have seen, the remnants of the 1960s? Is massacre an apt description?
Pastor?
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right, go ahead, Pastor.
Go, Pastor.
Sure. Thank you. But first of all, say thanks again for having me on the program, Dr. Hines, and for sharing this platform with two such great gentlemen. I take serious offense to the description of what occurred at Wisma as a massacre. It is an insult, it's an indictment, and it's actually a very, very serious attack against an entire ethnic group of people, the African descendants. What I continue to question, actually, I know the answer, is the agenda. Because for you to be so vicious in describing an act as a massacre, and then the individual seeks to refuse to confine himself to the dictionary's definition of the term massacre, it tells me a lot about him. And I want to say, as we begin here this evening, that my tempered approach may not be long lasting, because I don't take kindly to people who do certain things to me. And I'm included, though I was not born then. In the loins of my forefathers, I'm included in every act of accusation or atrocity committed against them, and I don't take that lightly.
Apostle London goes to the heart of part of what I said at the beginning, that ethnic conflict is partly driven by a people's feeling that there's a threat to their dignity, and you raise the question of dignity. It's one of the things that drive ethnic conflict. And when Brother Betoram was asked on the Freddie Kissing show whether his work is biased, he waffled, and then he was asked by Leno Craig whether he's an Indian activist, and he waffled on the subject. At other times, he has always described himself as an Indian activist. All right, but on this instance, he's not forthcoming, because clearly, if you're an Indian activist describing an Indian conflict, your bias is going to come, and there's no crime in it. All I'm saying is that you must understand the other side will have its own bias. And if we're going to build a nation, then we have to sit down and sift through the thing together. You can't. Well, you can, because he did. But you ought not to take one aspect of the conflict in total isolation from the other. You know, nothing is wrong in writing about the conflict. But when you isolate it from the larger conflict in Linden, well, what was then Wisbon Mackenzie, and the larger conflict in the country, then something is not going to rub the other side. Well, Sharma Solomon, Member of Parliament, former mayor, former regional chair, you are a rock star in Linden. You're probably the only person who got those 3 big accolades. Regional chairman, mayor, and now Member of Parliament. Over to you.
Thanks, Doc, and thanks to these distinguished gentlemen for putting forward such a very, convincing case. But I don't think we need to convince the public, because an investigation was done into this entire episode, and there is absolutely nowhere in that commission is there a classification for massacre. So I think the fact that you said we are young, I'm 46, and obviously, where I get my information from will have to be through research. And that commission conducted, interviewed, and established all of those things that are undeniable. It established that people were killed in May, Indians. It established that Afro-Guyanese were part of supporting Indians as they were being the disturbance killed the persons of Indian descent. It established also people had homes burnt. Those are not things to be denied, but what it never established was a massacre occurred. I think what Professor also further went on to do is what is missing after that in his book, a case of ethnic cleansing. And those terminologies are very, very important when it comes to the description and the narrative of what occurred in May 1964. It is Professor himself. Now, those positions you call as a community leader, I remember in highlighting the son Chapman in the discussion with the late Norman Chapman, and as regional chairman, we had the task with then Horace James of commemorating the Son Chapman event down at Horodaya, and it was far from the community. And I think this stunt commemoration made it difficult for the community to embrace and appreciate the nature and gravity of what occurred. It was Councillor Charles Sampson who, when we were in the council, we moved the commemoration to Christianburg. And I can say to you in that, it is where Professor Betoram, who recognized what we were doing since then, just about 2 years ago, approached and said, listen, I see the commemoration of the son Chapman, I see the recognition. And by then, every year, like I did this year, I would normally write a piece on son Chapman. And he said, but in May, they had incidents that, and I said to him, in respect for the dead and in recognition of the atrocities that occurred in this community, it is important for us to recognize everything that occurred, but to also establish that it was not unique to Linden. He agreed with that. Not only did he agree with that, in the presence of Malcolm Harry Paul, he accepted that the circumstances that occurred in May were not enough to be classified as a massacre. So I'm more encouraged to read the book now to see how we would have reconciled what he is now calling a massacre on the front page, more so a case of ethnic cleansing, when those terminologies came around mostly in the 90s. To now have what he said in the presence of Malcolm Harry Paul and myself, and I think he did mention this to the leader of the PNC, Mr. Aubrey Norton, who wrote that in his letter, that he, Professor Baitram, based on the commission of inquiry. So you ask again, if I feel the commission that did an investigation and where the professor himself would have also established that doesn't qualify it as a massacre, never establish it to be a massacre. That's one. And secondly, if you're looking in the context of what occurred nationally at the time between 62, 63, and 64, we had more atrocities, including the Abraham family, including the son Chapman, and you said 30. But the commission where an inquest was done for the son Chapman established over 40 Afro-Guyanese were blown up on a boat. So those things cannot be dealt with in isolation. And that is what we have now, for me, brought the discussion. It is just whether you say ironic or coincidental, and I think deliberate professor, that his book is out now, when I've accepted also the responsibility to ensure that we not only advance the son Chapman, but advance a few things about Linden, because what it does for Linden, it established what occurred in Linden, or where Linden was as a community living in a very homogeneous community. People came here in search of betterment. And then it says what occurred to Linden. But it also establishes now where you see no racial institutional structures established that says that Linden resembles anything of a racial society. And I think those things are important for us to establish now. So if you ask the question again, those reasons are in themselves qualifiers to say, or disqualifiers, in fact, to establishing what Professor classified as a massacre.
And to be fair to Professor, he did say on the Freddie Kissoon show, which is the only interview that I have heard him. I wanted to go to the book launch. Unfortunately, I couldn't because I too was even flood. Right. I was out of the, as they would say in Buxton, Doc, you were out of the jurisdiction. And I couldn't, but I wanted to go. But in the interview with Freddie, he did say that he prefers ethnic cleansing and not massacre. But massacre is what he is on the front of the book. And I am asking, how do you reconcile using the term massacre in the title of the book when you don't, according to you, don't necessarily believe that that is the apt description? I am confused, and that is why I would like to talk to Baitram. I have been on programs with Baitram over the years, and this is one of his pet subjects, this Wisma massacre. And he has always discussed it, and he, for the most part, has always described it as a massacre. So if he's now saying ethnic cleansing, then in a sense, is it just a change of terminology, or is it a change in how you feel? He says when it's pointed out to him, only 2 people died, as opposed to the son Chapman, as you're saying, 40-odd people. He says, well, it's not the number of people, it's the enormity of the problem. Again, the question is, how do you define enormity? You know, how do you define enormity? And so there are questions that have to be answered by Brother Beto. Doc, let me come to you, because like I said, you are unique in this thing. You are Douglas, which means
I learned a lot about the doubt of my origin here tonight.
Yes, well, yes, and Douglas in the positive sense, because as we do in the Caribbean, Douglas originally was supposed to be, as they say, the child of a prostitute, as a negative. And as we would do in the Caribbean, we take the negative and we turn them into positive. So when we talk about Douglas, we are talking about unity. We are talking about, right? Not Douglas in the wicked sense. Your mother was Indian. What? Talk to us. Give us an account of how you all make out. What happened during that period?
And we did suffer the consequence of it. A matter of fact, my mother and my 4 siblings had to be evacuated to Soos Dike during this entire disturbance, leaving myself and my father to fend. Of course, as I was a young teenager at the time, and I was still in school, and so we had to. I had to fend for myself with my dad, and I remember every day I used to hear, "Oh, we can beat the coolie out of you, don't worry," But a lot of it too was in it's not. I never felt threatened, to be honest. But it was in good spirit. I got into a lot of fight over it too, but that was okay. But Dr. Hinds, I think it's really important here because I got a couple of calls from friends, and all they heard about is the Wisma massacre, and it's just in terms of context, they do not understand the context of the early 60s, and they thought, well, the Londoners just woke up one night. And this devilishness in them, they decide, hey, today is going to be our day. We're going to go kill Indians, without putting it into the context as to where it started. So I want to bring that context here, Dr. Hinds. And I know nobody can fill your shoes when it comes to history in Guyana. It started in 61 when the PPP was elected, and you recall. Then in 62 we had what was called the Calder budget. And if you
not a cent more, not 1 cent.
That's exactly right. So that we started. So the tension started since then, and then of course remember. Something that stick in your mind: the February 16th, 1962. Did you remember that, the looting in Georgetown?
Yes.
Fires on. So that was the first thing, and then of course remember we had the 80-day strike that started in 63. All of those were not racial; they were more labor driven, where the Indians and the blacks, they were on strike and everything else. And then of course, to put things in the context, and I'm gonna I didn't make this up because I think this is very important. We had a commission that looked at all of the evidence, and I'm going to quote from the commission. And of course, the commission right up front in terms of a background, and they were very deliberate in giving it a background. And they talk about the Gawu strike. You remember the sugar strike?
Yes.
The Gawu strike that started, I think it was February 64. Gawu strike because they wanted to be recognized as the union. With the MCPA was the MPCA, which was Richard Ishmael union, which was more aligned to the PNC. Gawu was, of course, the PPB. And then that created a lot of tension because then you had a bomb that killed two strikers, not strikers, the people who didn't strike, which would belong to the
non-strikers.
MPCA. And then and it's right here. I mean, it says, and here are the key words, and this is the report from the commission, by the way. Keywords, chapter 2. The strike must be regarded in the context of the division which had developed in the recent years between the East Indians, the majority of whom supported the PPP, led by Chetty Jagan, and the majority of the Africans. So right here in this report, it is saying that in the context of the division, this is what really started it. And so when all of this tension and killing started, here's what they said also, because some folks died, but here's what they said. They said many people were murdered, and there were numerous cases of arson and bombing. The murder of a Negro couple at Buxton on Thursday the 21st had its repercussions in attacks on Indians and their property in the streets of Georgetown on the afternoon of Friday the 22nd of May. And then it said 3 days later, on Monday the 25th of May, the violence which had until then been confined to the coastal strip was extended to the Wismar Mackenzie Christian Borough and resulted in a widespread disturbances which it has been our task to investigate. So I put all of that together here. So this thing wasn't something that the Londoners woke up one day and decided they were going to kill East Indians. It had a context. And I was glad that, but this context was never, as well, I hadn't finished reading the book, but I did not see that context. It's just if we had this thing in us that we are going to, get rid of Indians and ethnic cleanse all of the Indians from Linden. And that was not the case. It's right here. They put it in the context. In their own word, this is the commission that looked at, and on top of that, and I think the Honorable MP said that this was happening all over the country, as they themselves said here. I remember when I started UG in 1970. That was when UG opened on the campus. I just started. And I had in my engineering class 2 East Indian friends from West Demerara. And let me tell you something. It chilled my spine when they were telling me what was happening on the West Demerara that we were reading about in Linden in the newspaper. When trains stopped in certain village, he said that they were jumping on the train with cutlasses and chopping up black people. So my point is, and I think that it's clear as crystal, that Linden did not just wake up and had it in their inner being that they're going to kill people. It had a history. And I think that not that anybody is condoning what happened, but it was a reaction to what was happening all over the country. So it's not only Linden, and it was just not an overnight feeling to get up. It was happening all over the country. And I think that's the context that I think that this year ought to bring out to the folks, and I think it's very important. But we were, even though my mom and she was evacuated, I don't think we never took it. She was never bitter or angry because she understood. She understood what was happening. It was just a natural sequence of events. So she understood that when she moved to Suzdijk, and when things calmed down, they came back. And by the way, things had calmed down. I was there. I lived through it. Things had calmed down because my parents were planning coming back. Things had calmed down after May. And then here comes the Son Chapman. Had the Son Chapman not occurred, things would have probably calmed down and gone back to normal within, a very short period of time. But the Son Chapman brought everything together, and that was send us in a spiral that we couldn't. It's hard to turn back in that period of time.
Thank you very much, Doc, for context. Because, as I said at the beginning, the question as we were approaching independence is who would govern. And the who at that time meant which ethnic group would govern. The 1961 election was a very close election. In fact, the votes were almost equal, but because of the first past the post system, the PPP won the election. And they did something. They held a victory march along the coast, from the east to the west. Ethnic triumphalism. And as they were walking through, there are reports that Africans were spat upon. In fact, there was an African lady from my village, I understand, who was a PPP member, who went out to the road to greet her comrades, but she was African, and she was spat upon. And so the victory march, of course, something of that magnitude is going to have a reaction, and a reaction, and a reaction. By 1961, an African is killed at Rosal and the Quarantine. And next thing you know, on the west coast of Demerara, in late 1961, there are reports coming out. Brother Yussi Guyana has a small booklet called Next Witness. And what he did is that people would write him from parts of Guyana, African Guyanese, and to tell of brutality, ethnic brutality against them. And he chronicled all of this in a book. And he intended to give evidence before the commission. That's why he called it Next Witness. And that small book is there. I promise that I have to talk to the family to see if we can republish it. Now, I didn't see Bertram cited from that book in any big way, but that account has been there since the 1960s, where African people are writing to Guyana, Sydney Kingdon, and saying, this is what we are experiencing. So context matters. And when you study ethnic conflict, it's very difficult to put your finger on who start and who end and who this, in the context of who governs, and things spiral out of control. And that is why Guyana himself, who was blamed because they said after the series got killed in Buxton had not been part of the conflict, just like Wisma Mackenzie, up until the series got killed. And there were accusations that Guyana gave the signal for the so-called massacre in Linden. And if you read the commission report, Guyana was nowhere on the scene. There's no evidence that he gave the signal. The PNC man there was a man named Mr. Jordan. His first name is escaping me now.
Robert. Robert.
Yes. And you read the Commission of Inquiry report, you're going to see it doesn't finger Robert Jordan. All right? So that report is very important. Apostle, let me come to you here. Put in context the context in which all of this is happening and how that must shape our understanding of what happened in Linden.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Because it matters. It matters because as one who loves Linden so much, I always tell people that Linden is me, and I'm Linden. Context matters. And I find it difficult for Bertram to, I think it's Ram Haraka's name or something like that, but for him to write without giving context is a dangerous thing to do. And before I seek to put context in context, as you said, how do you describe this, the title of the book, The Massacre, Wisma? Then he says, Ethnic Cleansing in Guyana. Now, this is important. He did not say in Linden, Guyana. He didn't say Wisma, Guyana. He didn't say Christenberg, Guyana. He said in Guyana, which then gives anyone without knowledge of Guyana the impression that African descendants sought to wipe Indian people out of Guyana. This matters when we speak to context. Now, we will refer to reports so often because Odin Ishmael, I think, is the person who would have penned it. And Odin Ishmael is an Islam person. Odin was very clear that, listen, Lindeners, I think his Hobbs, his name was, the police fellow here, was saying it's just a matter of time before it comes. It hasn't happened yet, but let's be prepared because some things are happening around Guyana that would inevitably likely provoke a response from Lindeners. It tells me, therefore, that when we consider the context of this matter, Lindeners, or those with Wisma Mackenzie, they were not really involved in any activity that would even give a hint to there being any form of violence that would emanate from them. They were cool, they were calm, they were observant, they were reading the news. But at some point, something triggered a response. And I'm speaking here on us understanding that when the African descendants responded to something, and I may be chided for this, and some people may take it out of context or take it incorrectly, no problem. But I'm strongly of the view, as I am now in reference to this current state of Guyana, that there's only so much that you can take when it applies to what you see as a direct effort to attack to maim and to destroy, in many instances, people who you may care about. And a lot happened in Guyana at that time. I'm happy that Dr. Adams, Vincent would have pointed to the fact that in the report, it was clearly written that this all started, and I'll say tonight, with Gawu. Because the PPP has a very unique way of tracing things. Say, oh, this happened over here, but we have to figure out who started it. Well, Gawu started it. Let's go to that fact. The strike began with Gawu. So if we want to be smart and reason as intellectuals as they want to try doing at their end, if Gawu didn't start a strike, nothing would have happened. That's what you ought to need to say.
And, of
And
course,
Gawu was certainly arm in arms with the PPP. So who caused the disturbance to begin in the first place? That's what we need to establish. It was Gawu.
And that's right here in the report.
It's written in the report.
And that strike was in response to the PPP's position that PR was imposed and they were not going to accept PR. PR or death was one of the slogans that was used by the PPP. In fact, what is not widely known is that Dr. Jagan and the PPP actually wrote to the United Nations asking for the partition of Guyana. We hear about Sidney King's joint premiership with partition as a last resort. We don't hear about the PPP, Dr. Jagan writing to the United Nations to ask for partition. And just as an aside for the audience, Peter de Geer had called for ideological partition. Right? These are facts that we have to know. Peter de Geer had called for ideological partition. And after the British introduced PR, Jagan said, well, let us partition the country. You see? And so therefore, context, a lot of what I call it, concentric circles. Yes, a lot. And this is not to minimize the fact that in the particular incident in England, in Linden, in Christiansborg and Wismar Mackenzie, that Indians were primarily the victims. I don't want anybody to go away and say that these men are trying to minimize that. Here is Vincent Adams. His mother is Indian. She had to be evacuated. But that is not all that's happening. And I come now, Sharma, to Son Chapman. You wrote a piece on Son Chapman. And as I said, somebody sent it to me. I posted it on my page. And it has up to an hour ago, 105,000 hits or reads. Just on one page, Politics 101 page. It tells me that there is something is happening in this country. And I think I know what it is. Because once again, we are being asked the question, this time it's not who governs, is who can control the resources that is coming from oil, the little that we are getting. Who is going to control that? And that is, we already see the signs. We already see the signs. And I hope, and I know all of you here hope that we don't go back to 1964. I was shocked. Freddie Kissoon did an interview with Donald Ramotar. And Donald Ramotar said, in many regards, we are way back to where we were in 1966. In 1966, we didn't own the bauxite. We didn't own the sugar. And in 2006, 2026, we didn't own the oil. Freddie stood up like a little moo-moo. Because he didn't expect Ramotar to say that. If any one of you had said that, he would have jumped and said, no, man. You got to expect that the foreigners got. But when Ramotar said it, he get like a little mouse. Because he didn't expect Ramotar to hold that position. And he of course, now he's such a political coward that he won't challenge Ramutar. But if it was a black person on the program, he would jump all over we for saying that. Sharma, put Son Chapman in context.
Doc, and I think I'm really encouraged by this discussion this evening, you know, because it allows for the discussion to bring Linden into context, because we have somehow made Linden the focus when, as we said earlier, this was an entire nation under siege with some wild, if you call it, political excursion. The Son Chapman incident, as I said, as chairman of the region, I took it as an opportunity to make it an issue to commemorate through commemoration committee. And it came directly from the inquest that was done. You know, one of the good things about Joe Chapman, son of the late Norman Chapman, is that they're not telling stories. They have all of this document, a whole lot of newspaper articles and clippings. It is from that, as a youngster, as a chairman, as a mayor, as a member of parliament, we have built an understanding and appreciation of just the gravity of what occurred in this community at the Son Chapman. I think what many times we miss of the Son Chapman is that even after such a grave situation that occurred to Black people, and I'm saying it, Afro-Guyanese, we still had that community that never, in a massive way, carry out mass execution of anyone. Because here it is, you had over 40 Afro-Guyanese, and you talk about context just now and why this is important. In that process, in this particular 2006 discussion as we're having now, and I'm glad we've extended it so far, it is to have a 4-part documented conversation. The one that you spoke about is the third of what is to come, the 4th on Sunday. And the Son Chapman was discussed this time around to really take on Professor Baitram, inclusive of the 2 that were done before, to lead up to what occurred on the 6th of July, 1964. So we are smart people, Doc, and I can tell you what words can do. So I can be writing something to say 40 persons were killed in 1964, the 6th of July. That's true. I can also say a true statement of 40 Afro-Guyanese were killed on the 6th of July, 1964. That's true. I can also say 40 Afro-Guyanese were blown to pieces on the 6th of July, 1964. That is true. We are to be very appreciative of how we also present what occurred in this community, because it is important that as we do so, people appreciate how do we recover. You just said, many times you share this story of Son Chapman, you talk about that 105,000 read. We get every year over 300 persons sharing just one story. But what we don't have is a consistent recognition of that story that people can appreciate. And this is why we brought it to Christianburg. And this is why we think every year, we believe every year it's important to mention the name and the event. And this is why we have this 4-part series. But it is not only to linger on May and Son Chapman, it is to also establish that Linden was not unique. So the 4th part of this series is to capture that which Guyana was, and where Linden unfortunately found itself in these 2 incidents of May and in July, and to let the world know that Linden was a casualty of this situation. This is what this 2006 episode and discussion is about, and what the challenge that we took Professor Baitram on to say, listen, we hear what you're saying, but it is not about how you feel and what you want to project. It is what the evidence and what is chronicled that we must also appreciate because we must respect the investigation. And this is where the son Chapman had an inquest. In that inquest that was done, it is what frames for us the discussion. And I think, unfortunately, we don't have so many eyewitnesses. Unfortunately, we don't have so many books written about the son Chapman. Unfortunately, we don't have so many discussions taking place about the son Chapman, as opposed to individual crime incidents that occurred in 62, 63, 64, and more so as it relates to the incidents that occurred in particular in Linden. So it is our responsibility, Doc. And just before I go, you ask about the triggers of the things that occurred in Linden, multiple, outside of the emotion of how people felt about each other, and it was charged an environment. We had the politics, of course, of competing political parties. We had the labor movement. We had the race relation issues. But we must not forget that Guyana had international environment coming out of the post-colonial period. That period, getting into our independence of a new nation and nationhood, in itself was a fuse that created a lot of these unfortunate outcomes that we are now speaking about. So our task, and in fact the task that I've taken on now, is to first put into context what Professor Baitram is speaking about and let the world know it was no massacre because the evidence as reported by the commission, and to also let the world know that the son Chapman occurred and just what the commission reported the son Chapman on, and to finally say this was not unique to Linden. This was a national crisis that lasted for over 4 years, of where many atrocities occurred. So that is our focus on this particular assignment at the moment, Doc. It is not to diminish, it is not to amplify, it is to ensure that we have a very sane conversation that respect, as you said, Guyana said, no guilty race, because it was just what the times were, but we have to be honest as we present the history of the times.
Sharma, and let me go around the table. Since you have the floor, let me start with you. This thing that the people blow themselves up because the guys were carrying explosives up to Linden and they put it in the engine room, and so it blew up the 40 people. Black people killed themselves. It was not a retaliation, etc., etc., etc. Do you buy that narrative?
You know, again, I go again, Doc, and it's unfortunate that Professor is saying that his book should be taken seriously, and he is making such an irresponsible and very flagrant position without any facts, without establishing. You know, the commission said, as far as explosives were planted on the boat, it said the boat stopped exactly the wharf and picked up 4 bags of paddy. As far as going to that, the commission never identified, based on the logs, of explosives being transported to Linden. Those things would have been part of the commission, unless Doc is with some level of evidence to first suggest that. I think he is irresponsible in his position of advancing that. And it probably takes away any level of seriousness of how to even approach the book that he's writing, if that is how he's going to conjure up ideas to just give as facts. I think it's unfortunate. So that's the first thing. And secondly, this is a community that we know in the mining of bauxite that use explosives. So those type of evidence of what Professor is claiming doesn't add up first. And secondly, the commission never identified to be something to consider, except the only consideration that 4 bags of paddy, when the boat stopped at the wharf, was placed on the boat, and further went on to suggest what sort of detonation was done. So Professor himself is being very reckless in just to make that claim. And I think for those who are coming with any sort of evidence Beyond that, we should present it outside of what was given to the commission.
Dr. Adams?
Well, I think I don't think we need to fall into this old trap of people trying to change what the real issue is. And that's an old trick. Now, to change the conversation to where somehow we got to be defending something that is insulting. So I would advise that none of us even dignify such a statement. Because it's I don't know how you address something like that. It's insulting to start with. So I would not even dignify it with any kind of comment, because it's not deserving of a comment.
Apostle? You're muted.
Thank you. As Dr. Adams is saying, under normal circumstances, I would just ignore Bertram and anybody else and just move on with it. But this is the PPP's playbook we're seeing at work. Let me bring my Guyanese. Adriana Young, her grandmother took her swimming. Don't worry about the fact that people looked at the pool, saw nobody, critics said there's nobody in the pool. Don't worry about that. She was always there, take what we say. Forget about your hurt, what we say is what we say. That's the culture of these people. And it requires an aggression. And that's why I said at the beginning that I would not likely continue being a scam, because I would love to see this person who I know is an intellectual and who's smart enough to know what he's saying and what would be the result of what he has said. How can he explain to me that he's writing a book, and in this book he would have authored, it requires such attention to be given to 5 people who were killed, but 44 people or 42 people who were blown up on a vessel is not such a big deal. They put dynamite on the boat and the boat blew up. It's your fault. When I am doing some research into this, and there's a report that somebody said they overheard 3 Indian men speaking about about blowing up this launch. The person approached authorities who didn't take it seriously. I also read that 3 people coincidentally got off the vessel. Thereafter, it exploded. And this fell, instead of saying, listen, we have to carefully spend time to investigate as much as we can what has happened in reference to Son Chapman. He said, that's not a big deal. With the Abrams family, they said Granny was playing matches and the house burned down. That was not an ethnic either. So if everybody were who Africans, it was our fault. But when there was a response to what happened to Indian people, it's still our fault. So I find it difficult as a young Guyanese man to sit around and allow the likes of Betaram to get away with this foolishness. He has to give account for what he's saying, because there's an agenda afoot. Why would he wait until we have the 60th anniversary of independence to approach Guyanese to say, we all talk about unity, we talk about love, black people kill Indian people, black man kill Coolie man, blow them and chop them up and beat them up and rape them. That's how you must celebrate. In the midst of this celebration, remember that you have a clan of people who are barbaric, who are beasts, and who will kill you all. And when we say, hold on, but 44 of us died in a vessel, no, you kill yourself. It's not such a big deal. You're all just crazy and mad and put dynamite in an engine room. So the captain ain't got sense. The smugglers have no sense, because I don't see how we put dynamite in an engine room and go on the same boat. So this requires a level of aggression, intellectual aggression, but also man-to-man aggression, because he got to answer to me if I see him, to tell me why he would do something so dangerous to my people. And think it's cool. It's not cool. It's not cool anymore for me. Because I see the agenda. The agenda where you want to point to all the dinners and say you all are barbarians. So we have to run away from you. Well, if you're scared of us so much, why you came back? If you want to cleanse all of y'all, why you came back? That's what I want to understand. Who in their right mind would return to Linden if we want to wipe you out? Who's the madman in this room?
Go ahead, Sharma.
I don't take things for granted when
I
it comes
really
to
want to
atheism.
feed off. I really want to feed off Apostle frustration. Here, why? And I keep saying as a leader, it's difficult to go outside of Linden and that stigma of misrepresentation and mischaracterization doesn't live with you. Trauma is a dangerous thing when we are feeding it on ignorance. So naturally, we can have a great grandmother who can pass this to her grandson who doesn't have no idea through heredity pass that trauma on. But we can also, through our discussion, and when that young Lindener goes to the bank, for example, and he puts Linden on that which is to require a loan, that trauma of what Linden is about and what we have done to Indian people, he will find it difficult. It happens to so many Linden. So a lot of young Lindeners may want to know why and how without recognizing how in ignorance a lot of this trauma is passed in both ways and how it is affecting them if we don't have a serious, honest, and level conversation. So when you see this deliberateness, you see it, you know it, you identify it, and this is what we are doing. This is why I'm calling Professor out. He said to me, we had a very cordial and peaceful discussion. He don't believe it's a massacre, but put that on the front page of his book. As I said before, you can say all the things that are true, including babies being ripped out of the stomach of Afro-Guyanese woman on that Sun Chapman when it was blown up. We can say that the river was filled with blood for 10 days, body parts scattered. We can say they never stopped fishing people out. We can say the parlors and funerals. We can say that every dead was connected to someone in this community. But that hurt and what occurred, as Pastor Apostle is saying, is then given to us as a responsibility for us to be blamed for, and how do we then advance that? So further to that, Doc, here is a PPP government that has been in power when this occurred. We commemorate the Enmore martyrs, rightly so, rightly so. And here you have 50, almost 40 persons dying, Afro-Guyanese. Not only no recognition from the PPP government, but here you have an advancement to mischaracterize and misrepresent that as if it is our fault and our responsibility. It's most disturbing and frustrating, and it deserves every level of pushback. Certainly, Doc.
And permit me, Doc, I don't know how many this, please allow me to do this, because as a Londoner, I'm affected by certain behaviors. You see, when you see these people look at us, when Indo-Guyanese of a certain ilk look at us and say, this time in a long time, they're talking about these situations. And I'm seeing it on my page, they come in that language to me. This is not a long time. What do you mean by that? So what this author would have stoked is a fire of division, a fire of aggression that was perfectly timed. Don't forget that this comes on the heels of Modi saying to his people when he returned to India that Indians are now dominating the social space, the economic space, the professional spaces in this country. They came as indentured servants, but they're now on top. And now here comes this one writing a book to say, listen, Africans, you fall at the bottom because you're beasts, you're barbarians. You get up on the only side and just wipe in of all Indian people. Guyana, as a matter of fact, based on the title of the book, you just eliminate all Indians from Guyana. You all are that barbaric. While we are so intelligent that we can revisit and say that after 20 years of research, we've arrived at the conclusion that Linderners are mad people, African descendants.
Ethnic cleansing.
Dr. Adams.
Terms that never existed. Ethnic cleansing never existed in the 60s. 90s terminology. We are giving it military context of cleansing people of a certain ethnicity as to what occurred in the 60s that never happened. Ethnic cleansing.
Dr. Adams, you are very much active in the struggle for a more equitable distribution of the oil resources between the multinational corporation Exxon and the others and Guyana. In a sense, you're taking a nationalist position. Do you fear that narratives like the one that emanates from this publication will dull our struggle for a more equitable distribution of the resources from Exxon and others?
You know, Dr. Hines, you wonder sometimes if, when you look at these things, you don't take it in a vacuum. You have to look at it. Is it this broad strategy? You said something that was very telling at the start of, when you give your introduction, when you talked about fighting for power and control, and you relate it to, now that you've gotten the tool to have that power and control, which is the vast resources that we never had before. I just feel as if, and of course, I go way back in my time growing up in Linden. It just and you had a bauxite company that was controlling everything. We could not even go. There was a gate. Gate at the Watuka, right by the Watuka place, where people like myself could not go past that gate. The only people who could go past it are the maids. They go in and they come out. And if you notice, every single one of those houses, and I think Nigel probably lives in. There's always a bottom house part of those homes where the maids used to live.
Yeah,
but
made room.
And the ships would wait until they get into the Demerara River to start cleaning down all of their deck with all of the toxic sulfur and oil, and so we would swim in that oily water, which is the most wanted, the benzene, which is in that tar. We never knew it then. Our skin would be full of tar, and it absorbs in our skin. Benzene, one of the most toxic substances known to mankind. We used to swim in it in the air. We used to breathe all kinds of. We would be playing cricket in the middle of the day. You have to stop because of all of the dust. I mean, thick dust. But again, it was all about money and control. And I feel as if I woke out of my sleep. I fell asleep 60 years ago, and waking up and still finding the same thing with this new. All we have is our new colonial masters, and it's only allowed by what this government is allowing. So I am definitely afraid when you hear this kind of narrative. To me, it's even empowering this government. And and my two Linden brothers here, and they may have remembered me writing before the election 12 reasons why Londoners should not vote for the PPP. And all of them were kind of hinged or directly related to racism. And you know what was the number one? Imagine in Lynn, you talk about racism. If they want to talk about racism, the number one thing is that what is that board of the board of guardians, which is they decide who should get assistance.
Public assistance.
What is it, like $20,000 a month or something? Do you know, Dr. Hines, and the public ought to know this because it still galls me. In Linden, where they say black people are so bad and we racist, all 8 members of that board are East Indians. All 8 members of that board in Linden are East Indian. You know what the first thing they did? As soon as that board was appointed, they took, what was it, like 500 or 600 recipients off of that role. People, people with disabilities and all kinds of stuff, and they were all black people. So when you talk about racism, but again, it all ties into exactly your question here, Dr. Hines. It's taking control. It's the control people, and now you've got the resources. Well, of course, that's why they're sharing out money to who they want. They're buying folks across. They've got the tools now. In the past, you could have said, well, it's just all talk and chatter. But no, they've got the equipment and they've got the weapon, which is the money. So that's my answer to your question. It's like I said before, it's just like if I fell asleep 60 years ago and woke up, and it's the same thing, and even worse now, because like I said, now they've got the tools to make sure that it happens.
Dr. Adams, if you remember in the beginning, I listed the 4 things that trigger ethnic conflict. And one of them was the opportunity to take revenge back on what you perceive. So Burnham dig it in Indians. He take away flour from them. He take away peace from them. He did all the bad things to Indian people. And now Indian people have economic power, fused with political power and cultural power. The revenge on the part of the Indian elites in the PPP. And so what I'm saying here, I'm putting the PPP's form of governance, I'm putting some of these publications that are coming up within the context of that opportunity for revenge. In a place like Linden, why are you having a board with all East Indians? What else explains that? What else explains it? I'm doing it because I could do it, because I have the power to do it. And what you're doing is that you're ethnically emasculating a community. Which brings us to the other thing, which is the assault on the dignity, the collective dignity of a group. And I know that you all hear it every day. I hear it every day. There are some black people who are accommodating to the situation. And even as they're accommodating, they're pulling you one side. And they're expressing that assault on their collective dignity as African people. And people take that thing for granted. People's collective and individual dignity. And some politicians are going around the place and sharing things to people and highlighting it on Facebook and so on. And they don't understand how much they're assaulting people's dignity. I live in a community and I make donations to causes as regular as possible, every week, everything. I would never, people say, you know, that's a certain politician, he just share out into people. I will never go public and say, I share this to this body in the village. All right, because I understand dignity. Dignity. And some people are holding up this nonsense where a man is going and sharing out things as some supreme form of political activism. It's an assault on the African dignity. And so therefore, we are moving into an era that things may get out of control. And it is people like us who will be called upon to hold that thing back. And that is why I am glad that we are having this discussion. It's a discussion about the past, in the present, but it's a discussion that will shape the immediate future. Where do we go from here? How do we manage? How do we manage the unequal and inequitable distribution of wealth with a narrative that says, Apostle, you're right. A narrative that said you're a barbarian. But barbarians don't deserve wealth.
Exactly.
They don't deserve wealth. Barbarians, you buy the vote because you think the vote is not part of their dignity. So you come in and buying the vote, you're stripping them of their dignity. And it's okay because barbarians and slaves ain't got soul and they ain't got dignity. Massacre, I have never heard black people, and I have to say it. I've never heard black people, they talk about their sufferings during the 1960s. I went with some researchers to Haslington and Enmore North, and they talk about being displaced from Enmore, but they didn't describe it as massacre. They described the victim. They didn't describe it as massacre. Bostonians tell me all the time, you all with this multiracial thing, we with you all with it. We with you all with it. But this is what we suffer. But they never said massacre. They never says massacre. And when in such an explosive situation, you introduce that terminology of massacre, you're doing two things. You're saying to one group that the next group are barbarians, and you are saying to the other group, you ain't got soul. You ain't got soul. You are soulless. And that is a recipe for trouble. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope we can work this through. Again, context matters. What is the context today? Oil wealth. Oil wealth. Local content. Who is local? Who is local? All these things. Development Bank, another mechanism to buy votes, another mechanism to steer money to non-barbarians. These terms in ethnic situations are explosive. I ain't saying black people and don't behave bad. In fact, black people just behave bad and make me feel shame sometimes. So I ain't here defending black people behavior. I'm distressed with some of the things I see black people doing today. I'm distressed. But I'm saying, I never hear black people talk about massacring. They talk about their heart. I never heard them talk about massacre. And I'm saying the origins of terminology matter. I love Brother Beethoven. Like I said, I have thing, and I intend to invite him to come. I hope he comes for us to talk this thing through. All right? The sight of an Indian man who loves his race, an African men who love their race, could be sitting down and talking through the roughness of our history, could be liberative. But we have to erase certain things like massacre from our lexicon. Sharma Solomon, Apostle, all of we Borden, but you're all young. You're all young. You are going to lead the way in this thing, and I'm submitting myself to all your leadership. And that's why I'm glad that you all are speaking eloquently and that you all have taken up this thing. I invited the Mr. Norton to come here. He didn't decline, but he didn't accept to come. And I wasn't inviting him in his capacity as politician. I was inviting him in his capacity as a Lindener. He wrote a couple of letters, and it's unfortunate that he didn't come here tonight.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, you know, because I think people have to see that politics is not an end in itself, that somewhere in between all of this is the humanity. And that what we are talking about here tonight is the humanism and the way in which a book with that title question the humanity of a group of people in Guyana. And we got to correct it. We got to correct it. Your closing thoughts, Brother Sharma, then Brother Nigel, and then our big brother.
Thanks again, Doc. Thanks to the distinguished gentlemen, Lindeners, to have this very important, and I believe very important. You know, we had our 60th independence. Our foreparents fought to give us political independence. And you're making the point. It is now upon us to ensure that we deliver to the future, our future, economic independence. And the countries at a state where we have that ability to do that. I think unfortunately we have are these interruptions of misrepresentation to ensure that we obstruct that, you know, and that obstruction comes when we are very lazy to correct the narratives of those misrepresentation. Um, Dr. Batram Professor, in fact, made the argument on how he perceives this matter to be. I am making it based on the commission and as a Lindener, based on what we see as the institutional structures that still exist and what we see as institutional structures is a community that lives in a very harmonious relationship with all the races at the moment. There is no structure that establishes that. And I think it is important for us to demonstrate to the rest of the world that Linden does not represent what is characterized in that book. And beyond that misrepresentation, that it was a national issue of 62, 63, 64, and Linden was very unfortunate to be caught up in that most unfortunate excursion.
And before you come in, Apostle, let me just plug tomorrow night. We're going to have your leader on, Manza Walton Desir. She is going to be here tomorrow night, and we are going to be exploring and discussing with her a range of issues, including the parliamentary tangle that she has been a victim of, or parliamentary agenda, legislative agenda, and other related issues, including this very issue that we are discussing here tonight, the question of the story at GCOM and the commissioners to go or not to go. A wide range of issues we're going to be discussing with Sister Manza Walton Desir. So tomorrow night, come out back in your numbers. We're going to have a warrior woman on. Tonight is warrior man. Tomorrow night is warrior woman. So come on back. Apostle London and then Doc.
Thank you, Dr. Hines, and I will certainly be tuning in tomorrow and also sharing the broadcast because I know that it'll be a very interesting and intriguing conversation. I would like to close with what Odin Ishmael, and I would like to certainly note for emphasis, an Indian man, a man of Indian descent, wrote in reference to the report. He spoke to what he considered to be the cause for what occurred in Linden, when he said that though the Indian descendants were few in number, their economic power was superior. They were businessmen. They owned quite a few businesses. And he opined that envy or jealousy would have been a trigger in his mind where the African descendants targeted their buildings, their businesses, and they burnt and so on and tried to reduce them to their economic equal because he said the Africans were really wage earners. I find that to be very interesting because in 2026, the African descendants are viewed as merely wage earners. And there is therefore probably going to be the consideration that we should all become equal. It's frightening to think, but it's logical to believe that if anyone seeks to continuously oppress and deny another group of the opportunity to thrive equally so, then we'll have a problem. So someone may question and say, well, what argument can you raise in this regard? I want to take you back further than what occurred in the 1960s to what occurred when our forefathers were freed, according to what they claim to be freedom. One set of people said, listen, we'll give you all, the Chinese, the Indians, and others, we'll give you the means to at least start something. The other set, you'll have nothing. The African descendants were told you have nothing to get. You're free, but you're entitled to nothing. The others, let's sign a contract. We'll pay you to work. And I always try to remind my African brothers and sisters, or Hebrews, I would call myself, to remember this fact that people strategically decided that you will have nothing and others will have something. We therefore have hope in understanding that we were able to build many things out of nothing. Today is no different. I believe that we will always be able to build something out of nothing because who we are lies up here, not here. And I thank you, Dr. Hines.
Doc?
Well, it was really a pleasure, and thanks again for having me on, Dr. Hines. But it was really a pleasure being with my countrymen, Sharma and Nigel here. Two outstanding leaders, and I think the Linden is showing that the future is in good hands. When you look at these two gentlemen here in terms of the kind of folks that we need to stand up. They can do both standing up and lead at the same time, to make sure that Linden, especially Linden, gets a fair treatment and characterization, and to push back when it's necessary. Notwithstanding the irresponsible and even provocative use of this massacre term, I think again it presented an opportunity for a discourse such as this to bring this thing to light and to put into context, which is very important, as to what happened here. It wasn't that, like I said before, that Linden had this thing in their DNA. Lindeners, that they wanted to they had this hatred for Indians, they like to kill Indians, and exactly what was happening in Linden. As a matter of fact, what happened in Linden was a response to wars that was happening all over the country. So I'm glad that we can put that into context here. And I think for the future, I think it's important that we continue programs such as these, and especially for two young leaders here, for we've got to continue to speak to the younger generation, because as we can tell from just your what you said about the Horners, 5,000, and I'm sure there are more young people there because they probably they weren't living in that time, so they now it's coming to their attention. They want to know what went on, so we got to speak to those folks. They're thirsty for that kind of knowledge as to what happened in their history, and those are the people we've got to speak to. Let's not forget. And when I look and these guys might have better data than I have, but when I looked at our census, which was probably old because the government has not been releasing census, but half of the population is below the age of 26, and I think I saw something that effect 2/3 is below the age of 30 something. So those are the people who've never been. They've never been here before. They might have been hearing about Jagan and Bornum. That's all they heard about. They've never been ingrained in any base ideology. They're looking at what is there in them for them today. And I think we've got two excellent leaders, two among many others, that can speak. And we should continue to speak to them too. But those are that's the audience that we need to be speaking to when these things come up, to paint the right picture and to put things into perspective. And the other thing is, Linden will be the fulcrum of Guyana development. I don't care what anybody says. When that road to Brazil opens, Linden will be the pathway to South America. And people are going to be exposed to Linden, and they're going to see exactly what Linden is. And so I expect, I've got high hopes. But of course, we've got to push back on the government trying to take control in a racist manner, such as that board that they're setting up, because that's just the start, by the way. That is just the start. And we've got to watch them and be able to push back.
Dr. Vincent Adams, of course, needs no introduction to our audiences. Pastor Apostle London needs no introduction. Sharma Solomon, like I said, is a Linden rock star and needs no introduction. I'm so glad that you all came tonight. I'm so glad for this discussion, because I think as party politicians, we have to demonstrate to this country that we are not prisoners of party politics, that our politics comes from a tradition that is grounded in the human instinct. The human instinct. You see, as politics sometimes can be statistic, you're counting votes. You're counting votes. But there is a politics that we are discussing here tonight that goes beyond counting votes, that goes to the heart and the dignity. I will, and I am very sure all of you here will defend the dignity of Indian Guyanese. You all have done it. You all have done it. I have done it. Well, Doc ain't got no choice.
I don't have a choice.
Doc ain't got no choice because of the tradition we come from. Given what we went through, we write the primer. We write the primer, whatever you all want to pronounce it as, for human dignity and standing up for it. And I make no apologies in saying that, because again, context matters. All right? We were reduced to chattel. We were told that we were not humans. And we are constantly having to affirm our humanity. And when we affirm our humanity, we are forming the humanity of all of God's children. All of God's children. And so therefore, we must speak and continue always to speak and continue to temper. As I said, I am not socializing black people to be barbarians, and I'm not socializing black people to treat other people as barbarians. And that is the essence of what it means to be present today, to tell the story of a long journey that has brought us to this point. Thank you all, brothers.
Thank you, folks.
And to you, the audience, as usual, I love you all. I love you all because somebody says that our people end up on nothing. When I see 1,400 people live here tonight, I know you all end up on purely stupidness. We shall overcome. We've always overcome. 2 morning more. 2 morning more. I'm going to invite Dr. Ramarak. I'm glad for him to come because he got to tell his story. And I hope when he finish with his story, all of we can sit down together and talk our story on this experiment called Guyana.